Hi, and welcome to the 30th episode of Dreamers and Doers, where I interview people who follow their passion and try to use it to make it a better world and to have a good impact in the world. And I think that's you, Mitchell Levy. Welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. Although
And
both of you and I are in our own location, so we didn't actually
yeah,
travel anywhere, but nice to see you on the opposite side of the world.
yeah, you're in California, right? It's Thursday for
I'm
you,
in, I'm in
Friday for
Silicon
me.
Valley, yes. Yeah.
Nice, nice. And I actually watched your TED Talk, and congrats on it because it was really, really interesting. I'll put a link in the video and the podcast. And
Oh,
in that,
beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, it was fun.
no, it's, and in that TED Talk, you talk about thought leadership. And can you explain a bit to people what you mean by thought leadership and why it matters?
Oh, sure.
And
So
maybe,
the interesting,
maybe how you got into it too, and in the first place. Yeah.
okay, we'll step back then. Let's see. During the dot-com days, I've been in Silicon Valley for 30 years. So during the dot-com days, I was called by people Mr. E-commerce. So I largely went into corporations and helped the CEO, the VP of operations understand that this new technology was going to happen to help us see the world in a different way, to be able to talk more directly with our customers, be able to change the supply chains in terms of how we did business. And part of it then is we still lived in the world at that stage where the thought leaders during the dot-com days was still very similar to the types of thought leaders we had during the industrial age. And so
What
let
would
me
that
tell
be,
you
the
what
90s?
the dot-com was sort of around 1997 to 2001.
Okay.
So it was around 1995 is when Mark Andreas brought to the world Mosaic. Mosaic was when we first started thinking about the internet. So it was the first web browser that allowed us to actually access the internet. The internet's been around for a number of years before that, but it was actually being able to touch the internet and interact with it via the web that allowed us to start thinking about its
Okay.
capabilities. So what I said, and even then, what is a thought leader? So let's define what thought leadership is, and why am I involved? Why am I interested? I'll fast forward to the end, then we'll go back at the end today. If you're not a thought leader, if you're not an influencer, if you're not a person who's recognized as an expert of who you are, you don't exist. Sorry. So let's back up. So in the old days, let's think about the world of the industrial age, the industrial society, where our thought leaders were actually brought to us by the publishing companies, the broadcast media, the publishers. We were actually told who we were going to see on the big screen, who we were going to read as books, who we were going to listen to as music. And those were our thought leaders. And because the company would spend so much money putting a thought leader out there, they wanted only one thought leader in a genre, in a niche. And so that person needed to know everything. They needed to create books. We published this book, but they needed to create books like this, 100,000 words, took 3 years to write. They truly were the quintessential generalist within their area of specialization. So what happened is the internet came along, and everyone is doing what we have now. We have a camera. We have a microphone. We have
Everyone
the
can
ability
start a podcast.
Anyone can start a podcast just like this one. Some of us are successful like you, and some of us are not successful, right? But it doesn't mean it's bad. So what happens is, if you want to get your brand out there, you now have the tools. The democratization of the ability for you to put the tools, put your message, put your thoughts out there is now available to everybody. All right, that's really cool. So what's interesting is the thought leaders of the past were given to us by the corporations. Nowadays, the people, we're making our own thought leaders. We're making our own experts. So what I now call a thought leader is, I will use the term synonymously with the word recognize expert. So here's what it comes down to. If I see a surfboard back there, if you want to learn about surfing, what do? You go to YouTube, you Google, you watch surf magazines,
That's
you
hard.
end up finding, Yeah, you end up finding a couple people you like. You start watching them, you start listening to them. If you want to learn and you could get educated from them, you'll buy their courses, right? In anything you do in business, if I want to learn about SEO, I'll go to the SEO experts. If I want to learn about funnels through Facebook, I'll go to experts. So what happens is people have figured out how to develop their expertise. And now we have so many more experts out there. The best way I could think about this is when you were a kid and you were growing up, your thought leader was mom or dad. When you had a cold, who did you turn to? Mom or dad, because they were the ones who could help you get better. Mm-hmm. So now when you're in business and you want to do something different, who do you turn to? So for me, my title, what I say I do is I empower, turn is not the right word. I empower experts, thought leaders, and companies to share their genius. And I do it through the ability for us to ghostwrite books for them. And so when people say, hey, I'd like to share my genius, or I'd like to do a book, or I'd like to be a recognized expert, or I'll hold up this book. This is a book that I wrote to complement my TED Talk. I want to be seen or be heard as a thought leader, or think of it, I want to be seen or heard as a recognized expert in my space. I want people to think, at least the audience that I want to address, I want them to think Mitchell Levy, right? So a thought leader or a recognized expert is who you turn to when you have an issue. And a lot of times what's fascinating is we'll turn to a friend. So if you have a particular issue in a particular way and you know a friend that solved that, you're going to call your friend and you're going to say, hey, listen, how'd you do this? Or what did you do? Or how can I do it? Or what software do I need to buy? Or who do I need to pay? Right? That's how we act today. So now your recognized expert, your thought leader is not standing on top of a mountain telling you what to do, someone who's not touchable. Your recognized expert is at the bottom of the mountain helping you climb up. So in many cases, you could talk to your experts, you could talk to your recognized thought leaders, right? And all of a sudden the term has changed, because if I don't want a generic answer that works for everyone, I want the answer that works for me.
Okay, yeah, it's really interesting. And so you talked about the books, and we'll dive into this a little bit. Do you think having a book is the best way to be recognized as an expert on a certain subject?
Well, there are many different ways to be recognized. Having a podcast that has thousands or tens of thousands or millions of views, having a video cast that does that, also an amazing way. One of the benefits of a book is, since the Bible, since the Gutenberg press, we have looked at this concept of a book as carrying truth. We have this concept of a book that if somebody spent the time to put their thoughts together and publish a book, whether they self-publish or somebody else published, that book says, hey, you're an expert in your space. So to answer your question, it's not the only way to go, but it is absolutely one of the best. And when I talk about a book, what we focus on, we don't focus on cookbooks or poetry or life stories. The book that I think about, the book that I care about, the book that I want to write for you is the book where, if you have a customer base that has a concern, has an issue, has a problem, in Silicon Valley, we call it a point of pain. If you have a customer base that has a pain point, if that's what you're solving in a business, what I want to do is write a book that talks about that point of pain.
Yeah.
Right. So I kind of referenced it before. If you want to be seen and be heard as a thought leader, that's your point of pain. And hey, you should talk to Mitchell Levy. This particular book, called Mingle, The Art of Face-to-Face Networking in the Digital Era. The two authors run a done-for-you meetup service. Their job, they're running 133 meetings per month in the United States. So what they did is they wrote a book on, hey, if you're going to come to one of our meetings, you might as well figure out how can you network and interact when you're actually shaking hands and have to look at somebody's eyes and give them attention, right? So this is an asset that drives more attention to who they are. It's a pain point they solve. I'll just show you one more. Notice one of the things, I'm going to show you two more. We do hardcover as well, because hardcover adds value. This guy, Eddie Turner, Eddie actually helps emerging leaders be more successful. And so his book says, hey, 140 simple messages to guide emerging leaders. One of the things that we do, Alex, which is really cool, is we create books in the format that people want to consume data. So our books have 140 bite-sized quotes. You'll notice that our books are printed in color so that when you open up a book like this, you're like, oh, this is really powerful. Oh, and of course, I turn to a page where a picture is not very colorful, but you have a blog post on one side, a color picture on another, and I'll turn and I'll show you my last book. And what happens is I also have, for those interested, I have a platform called Aha That. Aha That has 750,000 users who it's free to use, free to share. So if you just go to ahathat.com, you now have access to 47,000 aha messages that you could share on social media. So part of being...
What do you call a aha message?
Great question. An aha message is something that's 200 at Twitter size, so something that's 280 characters or less, 7 seconds or so to read, and it helps transform who you are. So let me tell you about, thank you for asking, by the way, let me tell you about Bill Wallace and his book, and then I'll read an aha message from it. So Bill's book, Being a Catalyst for Success, he is probably the biggest servant leader I've ever met in my life. He runs a group, he's been running it for the last 30 years in Dallas, Texas, called Success North Dallas. And he's been trying to write a book for 4 or 5 years. And so what we were able to do is be able to write a book, and as you can tell, the color on the inside, beautiful aha messages. But let me read my favorite quote, my favorite aha message from his book. And the way to think about Aha That is underneath, I'm going to read you message number 3. In the platform, underneath each one of these messages is a button for Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google+. So if you liked this message, Alex, and you wanted to share this message exactly as is with your audience, it is easy to do because you just go to the website and you click on the button. So it's Aha number 3. It's from Bill Wallace. It's from his book, Being a Catalyst for Success. And it says, living a good life is determined by the smiles that appear on the faces of others every time they see you, and they keep that smile after you've gone.
Beautiful.
What a nice life if you can walk into a room and people's smiles light up and you walk out and they're still there. I mean, what a beautiful life. So that's what he talks about is one of the things when I was doing the interview with Bill that was so fascinating, and I'll just read you one more aha message afterwards, is as I'm talking to Bill for a while and I'm hearing his stories, what I said to Bill is, Bill, you're one of the most glass half full persons I've ever met in my life. I mean, just amazing, right? Bill turns to me immediately and says, Mitchell, that's not true. So I'm sitting here, I'm going, I don't understand. I'm thinking to myself, what could he say? What does it mean? He goes, Mitchell, I'm not glass half full. I am glass overflowing. My job in life is to give to everyone I can. And I'm just full of what I need to do to be able to share with others. And to me, that was a quintessential aha moment for me because I always thought they were just glass half empty and glass half full. I now have 3 categories. There's a glass overflowing, and it changes your perspective when you see people who are glass overflowing. When somebody's glass overflowing, you're like, hey, you never take anything for yourself. Can I help you? Let me give you something.
Is it what you call also like a breakthrough moment?
So, yeah, an aha moment is whether the light bulb goes off. It's that opportunity. Now, by the way, some people think that happens to them once in a lifetime. Aha moments happen every single day if you're paying attention to them. It's when you just think about the world in a slightly different way. Let me read to you this is my favorite aha message from the book I wrote. So I'm going to read to you aha number 4. And I'll actually, for those who are watching, I'll show it as well. And what it says is good thought leaders are at the top of the mountain. Great thought leaders are at the bottom of the mountain helping others climb up. So what makes that an aha message
Mm.
is when you hear something like that, first you ask yourself, well, am I a good thought leader or am I a great thought leader? Am I a thought leader at all? Okay, am I at the top of the mountain shouting down messages, or am I at the bottom of the mountain helping other people be successful? Right? And if a single 5 or 7 second soundbite can encourage you to have all of those feelings and thoughts, it's an aha.
I have a quick question also on the book you just showed. There are lines where people can write. So, what's the point of this? Is it to write down your
It's
impression?
let's say you're a public speaker. Here's a good one. So, aha number 96. What it says is transform a negative attitude into a positive one. You'll live a happier life. So if I'm a public speaker, right, and let's say I'm in front of an audience and everyone has a copy of my book, I might turn to them and say, hey, why don't you turn to this page, look at AHA 96 and write down an opportunity today or yesterday or this week where you could have turned
yeah.
Right?
I think that's really cool. Like when I read Awakening the Giant Within by Tony Robbins, there was sometimes, like Tony Robbins goes like, okay, now think about your values and classify them. And there are lines in the book. So they make you do the work, which made the book way more powerful. So it's good to do books like this.
It's how it reinforces for you. It's how you reinforce the learning.
And then, so yeah, what I really like with books is very universal. So personally, I do online courses because I feel like it gives me more freedom to do include videos, to include assessments and things like this. Do you think, could you think that books are maybe getting replaced by these online courses or not really?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. Let's just go back to the 1990s or even early 2000 when the 2000s when Amazon came around and everyone said physical books are going away, everything will be ebooks. So here's what I'm going to tell you. The concept called a book is not going away, period.
I love physical books.
Now, but I will tell you that for many people, what a book is used for is changing. So in the older days, in the 2000s and before, you would write a book and that book would be transformational. That would be the subject matter piece that covered everything. It would be the one that you would set your curve on, set your movement on. It would be educational. You'd have to sit down and sometimes it would take months to read through a book. Mm-hmm. That's not what we do today. And actually, when I tell people who want to start a movement, who want to transform the world, I tell them to do what you do. So what's interesting is you create a book that is more of a piece that demonstrates you're an expert at what you are and who you are and what you do. And the book has a traditional platform and others to go out. And when you're the author of a Amazon best-selling book or an Amazon international, so I'm a international best-selling author of this book, that just sounds really good.
Yeah.
Where I'm going to do my transformational work, where I'm going to help people get educated, live better lives, or whatever it is that I do to help or what my authors do to help, that's going to happen either in the online course, which, by the way, you could both charge more and it's more flexible, or it could be the webinars that you run, or it could be the physical coaching that you do, or it could be, and you fill in the blank. So to me, the way in which people should be doing thought leadership and the types of things you do, you don't have to start with a book, but at some point in time, you need a book that says, here is the pain point I solve, come and see me. That'll attract more people. You want to learn more, grow more, learn, go to my course. You want some help to do it with you, go to my mastermind. You need individual coaching. I have a higher package that can help coach with you one-on-one. Right? So from a coaching perspective, there's a natural progression. Each one of those it sort of goes like this. Each one of them, it's a pyramid going up, has a smaller number of people that join and have a higher price point when you get to the top.
And how do you look at books? If I write a book, for example, I'm not going to lie, it would help for the social proof kind of side, but I would also not want to do it just for that, right? And to genuinely help people. How do you find, let's say, maybe the nuance between, like, of course you're going to do it to be recognized as an expert, but to do it from a higher purpose of contribution? And I'm not saying they can really go together, but I don't know.
I actually think they go together, Alex. I mean,
yeah.
Let's say you have a approach to life, by the way.
Just to cut you off, and maybe I'm just wrong, and maybe it's just, a limiting belief, but like sometimes I'm like, and we'll talk about the book later, but sometimes I'm like, well, just make sure you're not doing it, just for that social proof.
I see what you're saying. So here's the thing that's fascinating. The social proof also helps you expand your reach. The more reach you have, the more people you influence, and the higher your message will become. So the answer is social proof itself is not bad, but let me also tell you what I do. In this thing, in what we do, I'll do a 2-hour interview and I'll pull the genius from your head. So the book is yours, but then I'm going to match you with a graduate from the Aha That Writing School who will do the writing. And they're going to write the manuscript, which has 140 bite-sized quotes and 7 blog posts. So it's your content, it's your genius, and now it's put into format that people want to consume. You're going to have 140 bite-sized quotes, any one of which can capture somebody's attention. So the interesting part is your job with a book is the social proof and expanding your reach. And now here's also what's fascinating. Any one of those aha messages can also include links to other things, like the top of the funnel of your online courses, or videos where you talk further. So one of the things that we did with Bill's book, which was absolutely fun, is if you want to hear and feel Bill, at the end of each of the section summaries, we actually have a link to a video where Bill gives a 1 to 2 minute summary of what this section is, right? And so now what I think, a book is not just a physical piece of paper or a ebook, which is a PDF, but you can either type in, if you're physical, you're typing in, if you're ebook, you're clicking on the link, and then you get into a video. And then of course, at the end of the video, you can be brought somewhere else. And so it's the overall notion of, where do we want to learn? Where do we want to consume data? And you have to present the way in which people want to consume data in the different places they want to consume it. And a book obviously is one of them.
Nice. And do you do, I'm a huge fan of audiobooks. Actually, most of the books I've read are actually books I've listened to. Do you make them in audiobooks too?
So you queued me up really well. So yes. And we have a platform. I just introduced it about 2 months ago called Aha That Radio. So if you go to Aha That Radio, AHATHAT radio.com, what we do is we stream the authors that have read their own books. We stream their books 24 hours a day. So if you want to be continually influenced by people who are sharing their aha messages, we're playing those 24 hours a day. And cool. It's oh my God, it's so much fun. And so what happens is when the book is done and we go to press, we do an Amazon bestseller campaign, and then we sit with the author and we go, listen, would you like to read your book? And so it's either myself or my partner will sit down and help the author read their book, because it has more oomph to it if it has the author's voice. We can do voice actors as well. But I really like authors reading their own books. So you're sort of feeling the personality of the author themselves. And so the actual aha book, because it's 140 aha messages, is about 30 minutes to listen to. But the problem of listening to an aha book is every time I listen to it, I'm getting all these aha messages. I want to stop it and, write stuff down. And just as an aside, one of my favorite audio books in the aha messages is 140 Irish Proverbs. And so we have we have an Irish Proverbs book, and to listen to 140 Irish Proverbs at once, it gives you a really good feeling to the culture and society. It's pretty powerful.
Mm. Actually, I had a question on ghostwriting because you talked about the importance of the author reading the book. Do you find that ghostwriting could be an issue with, like, I don't know, for example, when I create my online course, even though I'm not a native English speaker, it's not going to be said in the best Shakespearean English. I prefer to go direct because I feel my message is way stronger if people feel it comes from me, you know. Don't you find that could be a problem with ghostwriting?
So just like thought leader has many ultimate definitions, ghostwriting also has multiple definitions. Mm-hmm. So there's a concept of ghostwriting where the author says to the writer, I want a book on, and they fill in the blank, and the writer mm-hmm. goes away and does their own thing. Okay. That's not the ghostwriting we do. Okay. So the ghostwriting specifically for That is, and we'll start off with what does it mean when you and I are talking, a 5-minute conversation, just an interactive conversation like this will produce 5 or so aha messages. Mm-hmm. Right? By the way, that's an aha message. When we have a normal conversation going back and forth, in 5 minutes, we'll produce 5 aha messages.
Actually, right? One of my biggest breakthroughs was sometimes to get aha messages from just regular conversations with friends and thinking about it later. Yeah.
Isn't that the coolest thing in life? So what that means is you're actually listening when you're having a conversation, and the presents that come to you come from so many different locations, right? So when I'm speaking with somebody, what I'm going to do for the interview, and right now it's Mitchell Levy's the primary person doing the interviews. When I get way too busy, I'll create a certification program and have other people do it. So what I do is I actually listen. And what I'm going to listen to is what is the pain point you're trying to solve with your clients, and let's talk about that. And essentially, you're going to give me information, and I'm going to ask questions for a 2-hour period. And trust me, you personally, you know, as somebody who's the author, you're going to have all these aha messages because in life, people don't give you 2 hours of undivided attention. I'm giving you 2 hours of undivided attention. And what happens is when our ghostwriters are actually listening to the author's verbiage, they're trying to keep it in the tone, in the voice, in the way the author actually presents information. And so when we submit the manuscript back to you, it's really your concepts and your terms. What I'm doing is I'm pulling out the best of your brain. I'm pulling out your genius. And then our writers are putting it into bite-sized formats.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds really good. Actually, well, let's talk about it. I had in mind doing a book, but be a bit different because I'm a huge fan of Tim Ferriss. That's probably my inspiration for starting a podcast and a lot of my personal growth journey. And I really love Tools of Titans and Tribe of Mentors. And the idea I have in mind is, so I interview a lot of people that are 25 to 35 and that start following their passion, that are not successful yet, but that I think have developed the mindset to become quite successful people. And I'd love to do, and I thought if I were to do a book now, it'd be probably something where I get the best from my interviews with these people to give inspiration to people who are around this age. So yeah, what do you think of, do you know a lot of books that are a bit like Tools of Titans or Tribe of Mentors, which are actually collection of other people's best insights?
We do those all the time. So I'll give you 2 examples. And by the way, when you pick up the 4-Hour Work Week, take a look at the acknowledgement section. You'll see my name. So Tim actually interviewed me for one of the stories. It's just because I had a publishing company, I think the publisher said, hey, let's not use Mitchell's story, but Tim at least got me in as an acknowledgement.
Okay, yeah.
So let me show you 2 examples of what you just talked about. So when I did this book, instead of actually having all of my content, I actually interviewed 4 experts, 4 thought leaders for a half hour each. So this guy runs thought leadership for Cisco. Teresa runs a group of 1,000 other thought leaders. Robert Clancy has 500,000 followers on Facebook. And aha number 4 that I read to you before, actually that was written by Robert Clancy. So when you look through this book, you know, you could see that every quote has attribution to the author. And so this is a book that has only 20% of the content in this book is mine.
Okay.
So that's one way to do it. And basically, you could take your existing podcast, assuming you have permission, and just pull the aha messages out of the existing podcast. Here's another approach. This book is called The C-Suite Executive's Guide to Success. It's from an organization that has 50,000 members, and they actually also have the C-Suite Network. The C-Suite Network also has 200 plus C-Suite Network advisors. So Alex created a Google form with 4 or 5 questions, sent it out to the 200 advisors and say, please respond. 40 of them responded. And so this particular book, this will be hard to read, and I'm showing this to people. I'm showing a list that has on both pages the contributors to this book. And so what you could see if you looked in detail is that each one of the contributors had between 1 to 4 contributions, 1 to 4 aha messages in the book. But now we have a book that has 41 authors. So the answer is, it's powerful to get a group of people together to come up with a collective piece of content, particularly if you can get that group to get excited about it. Because if it's really their book, so in this book, this C-Suite book, it's a C-Suite Executive's Guide to Success. A number of the network advisors in the book bought copies of the book to give it to their clients. Right?
Yeah,
so that's right. So it's powerful.
Smart.
And so Alex, what it comes back to is crafting the technology is easy to do. It's relatively straightforward. I'm happy to show you either on the air or some other time. But what it comes down to is thinking about architecturally, what are the right questions you want to ask so you can pull out the right information that you want to pull. So it's either you go back to previous podcasts and you pull content from there, or you can create a survey form and ask people for questions.
Yeah. I think that's what Tim Ferriss did for Tribe of Mentors. He sent emails, and I think in terms of the work you put into it versus the like the results you're gonna get, it's actually very smart.
Agreed.
Quick question also on social media. Like, do you use it much, and do you think it's a good way? I guess it depends on how you use it, but sometimes people think, there's so many influencers already on, let's say, Instagram, for example, that it's actually not that a great way to differentiate yourself versus like a book or a podcast or online courses. Where do you think that fits in a strategy to being heard?
Got it. It's actually a beautiful question, because there are many people you're going to run into who say, I'm not interested. But here's what you have to think about. In order to have somebody be a client of yours, they'll most likely need to run into you and be influenced by you at least 7, sometimes 10 different times. So if I met you at a networking event and I go, God, Alex is really interesting, I think he could help me. And you give me your name, or you give me your card, or you text me your video card, the first thing I'm going to do is Google your name. And when I Google your name, the social media companies are spending hundreds of millions of dollars to make sure that your name in their platform pops up. So what if you're not there at all? And I get other people with your name and I go, this guy must not be important because he doesn't show up. Or what happens if your profile shows up, but you haven't posted there in a year? I'm going to say, well, this guy, he's not really interesting because he doesn't see importance. So it's not that you need to have the best social media platform in the world. It's not that you need to have hundreds of thousands of followers. What you need to have is something that presents you well. So if you want to go through life as a Volkswagen Bug, present yourself like that. If you want to go through life as a Ferrari or a Bentley, present yourself like that. And there's no right or wrong of how you present yourself. What's not right, what is actually wrong is if you have a valuable service, if you have something you could give, and I'm going to say to the world, but I'm going to say it's whatever the small market of people that you serve. If you have something to value, it is wrong not to make sure that they at least know who you are. Right? That's what, in today's world, you can touch anyone in the world. And you can't just, one day, Tim Ferriss didn't happen overnight. Tim Ferriss was from Silicon Valley. I knew Tim before Tim even wrote his first book, and he was a different person. The same fundamental concepts of who he was there, but nobody knew who he was, right? And he just methodically went through and he started growing his audience, and it kept getting bigger. But not everyone in the world needs to be the next Tim Ferriss, right? Or next Tony Robbins. You need to figure out who is the audience you want to address, who is it that you want to serve, and target that audience. So you don't need to have an Instagram following that goes after people who are not your audience. So go after your audience first, and then if it takes off beyond there, then you have choices, and those choices are fun to be able to make.
And okay, well, that's really insightful. So thanks for that. And I had a question also on the TED Talk, because I think one of the main source of being an expert today is having a TED Talk, right? So how did you kind of manage to get a TED Talk? Was it kind of a goal, or do you think it happens naturally when you start to get more heard?
Interesting. I've had a very fortunate life so far. I've done so many fun things. And there was actually a point in time I was asked by a university to do a commencement speech. Now, the number of people who do commencement speeches are so small. And so technically the value of a commencement speech should be so high. But, even though it's on my website, I get very few people who go, oh my God, you did a commencement speech. That's pretty cool. Whereas the concept of TED and TEDx's are so broad and so well known. They've done such a great job of branding and getting their message out there that if you get the opportunity to do a TED Talk or a TEDx talk, it's a great way to put a legacy piece in place. And so what you have to recognize, so I probably gave thousands of speeches before I did the TED Talk. I mean, thousands of speeches. TED Talk is different, right? I don't like to memorize speeches. Alex, I don't think you're the same way. So when I get in front of a group of people, whatever inspires me, boom. If I have a talk for a half hour, tell me the topic, boom. If I have to put slides together, I'll do them for reinforcement. But the webinars with slides and all, it's not as much fun for me. I like to sort of read the audience and give people what they want to hear. When I talk to my friends who particularly have done successful TED Talks, what they said to me was a couple things. Practice till you know it like the back of your hand. And I know, Mitchell, you don't like to memorize talks, but you've got to memorize this, and you have to know it like the back of your hand, and just practice. So, Alex, I have to tell you.
Did you do it?
A couple magic words. Oh, it changes everything, by the way. So I practice like there was no tomorrow. And I have to tell you a couple magic words. When you go to a conference venue, now you can't just go there and say it live, but if you know you're going to a conference and you call up the conference organizer and you use this magic word, I'm giving a TED Talk, can I practice? Everyone I said that to said yes. And so the interesting part, I got to practice a lot, and I also did a bunch of this. I basically Zoom interviews with my friends. I said, can I practice my TED Talk? They said yes, and I'd ask for feedback. What happened is I had done the practicing for about a month. I thought I was ready to go. It was 2 weeks before the actual TED Talk, and so I was in front of a group of people. They were videotaping me. I gave the TED Talk, and I hated it. The reason I hated it is I had it mostly memorized, but what happened is I gave the talk from my head, not from my heart. And the people in the room didn't seem to notice, but when they were giving me feedback, the things that I missed, the things I didn't talk about, were the things that said, hey, this is from my heart, not from my head. And so one of my friends gave me some advice that I'll remember forever. And that is the day of the TED. So basically it was the best present I could have ever had, because then I really practiced hard and I remembered to talk from my heart, not from my head. And so the day of the TED Talk, I did two things. So my wife told me, all right, honey, take a picture of yourself and make sure nothing's out of place. Okay, so I did that first. And then my friend said, Mitchell, say to yourself, be the TED. And to me, what that meant was I needed to actually focus on, oh, hey, Rob, I'll have to come back to you since I'm recording for a live show. If you could give us about 10 minutes, that'd be great. Sorry about that, Alex. So, by the way, that's a fun thing. We'll talk about that in a second. So what was interesting is, to me, it just meant I needed to be present, because when you do a TED Talk, I got so much pleasure out of being asked. I had so much fun practicing. I so enjoyed the talk itself. And now I'm enjoying the after effects of having a legacy piece that people enjoy. And I think you just got to make sure you put in the effort to deliver the best you as a human possibly could.
And do you think you could have overthought it then if you prepared too much? Do you think there's a risk? Or do you think it's fine to prepare it, but just then you prepare it so well that you prepare it so you know what you're going to say, but you also prepare how you're going to deliver with your heart?
Yeah, you don't want to be at the stage where it sounds like it's memorized. You can't do that. But let me tell you what happened during my talk, which if you watch my TED Talk, you won't be able to see it. They gave me this clicker, and one of the buttons on the clicker causes the screen to go black. So I don't know why I got that type of clicker. And twice in my presentation, my thumb pressed the wrong button and the screen went black. Now, what I could tell you, because it was so comfortable and I knew where I was, I kept going without a beat. So the soundtrack didn't need to get modified. And because it was a 3-camera shot, they didn't need to show the screen when the screen went black. And I think that was just the part that I was comfortable, right? I felt good about what I was talking about. I knew who the audience was. And that's the one thing to think about. When you're giving a TED Talk, the audience is not the people in the audience. I mean, you do want to have engagement. You do want to have interaction, but the audience you're speaking to is the audience on the camera. It's on the other side.
Okay. That's interesting, because you could think that thinking this might be a danger then for your presentation, to think too much about the people. Like, for example, when I do a podcast with you, I know the end product is more the podcast in itself, but I find that it sounds better when I run it like a conversation.
Oh, it's a lot better as a conversation. And that got me too. So we're using my Zoom room. Just for those people who are listening, we're also seeing each other. Okay. Seeing each other is good because you see body language. And I've got between 10 to sometimes this week I had 18 meetings in a day, all Zoom calls. So it's great to see people without actually leaving the comforts of my place. Right. So here's what's interesting. My next meeting came on and they came on 7 minutes early. And I think it's great that they came on 7 minutes early. And the thing is, the first time that happened to me, everyone got embarrassed. And so what I have to say is, you pretend it's like you're standing by the water cooler and you're having a conversation, somebody comes by and you go, great to see you. I know I'm going to be talking with you. Don't worry about it. You could stay here if you want, but let me finish up my conversation with Alex. And if you're at the water cooler, you understand it. If you're on Zoom, people get all panicked. So I just thought I'd mention it, that some of the real world things that you do, those real world analogies, also apply to the online world. And you just have to think about what's safe, what's comfortable, making sure people feel happy with who they are and that they didn't make a mistake. And, whoever my next meeting is, he'll be eternally in this podcast.
Okay, that's cool. I had a last question because you don't want to make that person wait too much.
I know. I'm
Actually,
sorry.
actually, I wanted to ask you a little bit of feedback for myself on the podcast, on the questions, and because I think it's very valuable in general. Like I saw, for example, when we talk together, I really like. It's very good. Like you kind of compliment me. That's a beautiful question, and I guess that's really good. I don't know if it's something you learn or that's innate, but that makes the conversation really flow and really nice to have. So thanks for that. So yeah, I'd be really interested in your feedback on our conversation.
Oh, well, it's a nice trick. I mean, because I have to think about I don't have canned speeches, canned responses. And just what I love about you, you don't either.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because if you can have a conversation and the TED Talk is how do people trust you? Well, you have to be vulnerable. You have to have integrity. You have to have authenticity. So when somebody asks me how you doing today, I actually think about it. Right. And the answer I give is the answer that how do I feel right now at this moment? And I don't want to give the pat answer. So so the trick is if you actually ask me a good question, saying, hey, that was a beautiful question, that gives me another second or two to think about my response.
And just and let's say, so my question will be feedback on this podcast, but let's say, as you just did, more generally kind of advice to make such a conversation great and more flowy.
I would say the most important thing anyone can do if you're running a podcast like this is do enough research of the person you're talking to and know generally the outcome you'd like to generate for your audience. Right? So notice the first question I asked you, absolute first question. It wasn't like, hey, how can Mitchell Levy get his brand out? The first question I asked you is, tell me how we can have a good experience so that your audience benefits from what our conversation is.
Yeah.
And for me, so as a guest on your show, it'd be great to get my brand out. Your job is to help me get my brand out, but do it in such a way where your audience goes, holy cow, or holy shit, Mitchell, he's a cool guy. Hey, Rob, you could join us for a second. We're just wrapping up a podcast, but you don't have to leave this time. I'm just finishing something with Alex, and mostly it's verbal. So those that are listening, guess what? We've got Rob Ganai with us, but you don't need to speak because I'm just finishing with Alex. But let's Alex and I finish up if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, let's finish with the brand. So how can people learn a little bit more about what you're doing? What's the best way to follow you?
Beautiful. Thank you. And what I'll say to you, Alex, whether or not we do business together or talk, I just so enjoyed interacting with you. Feel free to reach out anytime and happy to give you thoughts and ideas.
Well, thanks so much for doing it and doing this interview. It's really interesting for me.
It's
really helping.
Honored beyond belief. So for those people who are looking for content to share on social media, we have a platform, ahathat.com. It has 47,000 pieces of content. It's free to use, free to share. So please go to ahathat.com. If you're considering writing a book or would like us to write a book for you, go to ahathat.com/author. You'll see video testimonials. You'll see a 3-step writing process. And if you want to press the easy button, if you don't mind me being a little bit corny, if you want me to press the easy button, we will do it for you. If you want to listen to AHA messages 24 hours a day, go to ahathatradio.com. And then in terms of interacting and touching me, what I want to do is make sure I play with you. I know that sounds bad, but I want to interact with you in the platform that you actually interact with. So as I said before, if somebody Googles your name, they get to social media sites. So Google my name, Mitchell Levy, Mitchell, last name Levy. You'll most likely see my TED Talk. If you want to see my TED Talk, just do Mitchell Levy TED Talk. But if you Google Mitchell Levy, the social media sites that you typically interact with will pop up. So connect to me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Snap, Instagram, and I'll try to interact with you on that platform and address your questions. And if there are things I've done before, how I expand myself is I'll direct you to videos of things where you could learn yourself, and then you come back to me with better questions. Did that sound okay?
Amazing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a definitely a way to keep following your amazing work. So thanks so much, Mitchell. Is there anything you wanted to add before we wrap it up?
No, Alex, I really enjoyed this. I'd love to continue the conversation with you, regardless of the direction you go on the books you're putting together, and of course your thought leadership, because you've done such amazing things in the small amount of life you've had so far. So you're going to go really far, and I'd love to be part of that.
Thanks, Mitchell. That's amazing, and we'll definitely keep talking because I love your work. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks,
to everyone
Alex.
who listens.
Have a great one, and let's stay in contact. And the audience, you guys, this guy's amazing. Give him the kudos he needs.
Thank you, Mitchell.
All right. Cheers.